Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to our intro to the High Republic, the new era of Star Wars. And with me to discuss this and to talk about the first 3 novels that have been released is Kyle Larson.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I can't even tell you. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Kyle is a regular contributor to Star Wars Newsnet and also to What the Force, and we're very, very happy to have him on and to talk about the High Republic. And this has been, like, they teased it for so long. Like, I remember
so
being
long.
at Celebration. It's like, Project Luminous. Okay, what is this? And like, you know, they gathered together probably the best writers of the new Star Wars era. I would say Charles Soule, Claudia Gray, Kevin Scott, Justina Ireland, Daniel Jose Older, all together. And they kind of made like they kind of referred to it like the Avengers Initiative, like everybody coming together to kind of craft a new era. Because one of the struggles that they identified in the past is that although they have legends, Star Wars doesn't have pre-existing material to draw on or to craft new stories from, much like, you know, other works out there. They only have the movies. And the problem with that is that, like, people can get caught in nostalgia circles.
Right, exactly. And there's none here. Which is really nice. There's things that are familiar. It's nice to have those kind of like as little like lifeboats if you start to struggle. But it's a lot like with kind of like, well, not so much, I guess, Thrawn, the new Thrawn book, like the Ascendancy book, like Chaos Rising. But it feels like this is definitely a new, like there's so many new things here, but they're tethered to not old ideas. I guess they're new ideas because they're in the future.
It's like thematic ideas, right?
Yeah.
Like that feel familiar, but they're exploring them in a new era.
Right. Exactly.
I think that was like my biggest fear, especially given that the High Republic is still happening within Yoda's lifetime, that we wouldn't be able to maybe feel the difference in the time period.
Yeah, exactly. And like one other thing too with like Yoda and with the Jedi too is that the Jedi Order is still there, and there's this, they're, obviously like this force in the galaxy, but they're not quite as, like the dogma doesn't seem to be quite as rigid there. Like there's even some people joking about that. Like a lot of the stuff seems to be a little like loose, a little more loose, and like seeing a new era of the Jedi, but maybe we are starting a journey to seeing how that dogma became so rigid, and maybe what happened to create a fear that made the Jedi so constricting of like, stripping away the humanity of their disciples in a way.
Yeah.
So that they couldn't deviate, which
Absolutely.
is interesting.
And like when the guidelines become more dogmatic, there is reasons, right? It like whenever you pick up a coffee from you go to your local Starbucks or your local wherever to pick up a coffee, Dunkin' Donuts, and it says caution hot. That exists because somebody literally burned themselves and like sued the restaurant because they didn't realize the contents of a insulated container would be hot.
Yes.
That's how I view like the Jedi dogma is like the rules were kind of always there. Like be careful with hot liquids, be careful with your emotions, be careful with how you view attachment, understand those things, but be careful with it. But then it became like these hard and fast rules when we get to Anakin's and the fall of the Republic, right? That period of time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I am very pleased to announce that I can actually release the interview that I had conducted specifically around the High Republic period of time. Back in June was its original release with Charles Soule. I had to actually edit out all of the aspects of the High Republic just on the request of Disney Lucasfilm Press because they were pushing back the High Republic to the new year. But guess what? It is now the new year, and they've given me their permission to release this interview. So here we go.
All right.
I am very much looking forward to the High Republic.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially when you brought together the dream team, the Avengers.
Yeah.
Because I love all of the storytellers that are going to be kicking this all off, and especially the idea of this invasion, in a way, of these extreme space Vikings, as they have been referred to. So
Nile,
it's is it a reference to nihilism, that they just don't believe in the things?
It is. It's a reference to both nihilism and annihilation. That was a term, like, I came up with that, and it was one of those things that people weren't sure about it because they thought it might be difficult to pronounce. Nihil, how do you say it? And I was like, people will get it. They will understand, and it's too rich not to do it. There are elements in Star Wars where, like, it's sometimes it's on the nose in a good way. And for me, a mix of nihilism and annihilation felt like a good name for the bad guys. Yeah. So yeah, they are super cool. They have their goal is not galaxy-wide domination, which is refreshing. They are not trying to control everything. They're just kind of trying to get theirs. Mm-hmm. Feels very different than anything we've seen in Star Wars. And it's like asymmetrical warfare. Like, it's the recent conflicts we've seen in the world are not like World War II and World War I. It's not nation states. It's an enemy that is much more difficult to deal with. And so we will see them doing some really cool things. I'm so deep into it now in my head that, like, I'm trying to remember now what has been released publicly, and almost nothing has been released publicly. So I think what I've said might even be more than what has been said.
I think so. That it's a confirmation of something I tweeted speculatively, which is this is related to nihilism.
Oh yeah, well that's right in there. I'm happy to say that. Like, that's fine. Yeah. It's both. I came up with the name as a pulling from both annihilation and nihilism. Those two things together. And
your book is going to be the first out of the gates as far as what is going to happen. So it's going to be Star Wars: Light of the Jedi.
Light of the Jedi. Yep.
Yeah. And the main character is Avar Kriss. And I think one of our forbidden questions, so we'll get it out of the way, and then we'll wrap up with a little bit about, like, how this is going to add and what people can look forward to that you can tell us, is tell me the top 3 themes and tropes that you would use to sell me on the book.
Sure. Okay. The first theme, the overarching theme for Light of the Jedi is optimism. Right. It's a time in the galaxy. The High Republic is a time when it's not a galactic civil war. It is not a time when trade routes are in dispute. It's not a time when Snoke and the First Order are encroaching and Luke Skywalker's disappeared. It is a time when things are pretty good. And so there's a sense of the galaxy is not as settled as it is in the time that we're used to seeing in Star Wars. There are a lot of elements that are going to seem like, oh, well, I know where this goes, but it's not there yet, which is really fun to play with. The people we meet, whether they're Republic or Jedi or whatever, they're like, well, we can get this done. We can do this. And the kind of analog that I would say is Camelot. And it's both Camelots. There's the Camelot from King Arthur, Arthurian legend, which was a time of when England was ascendant and kind of everything was going well. Arguable when you sort of read those stories, but still, like, the idea was that it was a time when things were kind of together and good. A great king was in control. Then the other one is obviously the 60s, the 1960s in America, when the Kennedy administration, a time when, wow, look who we have in the White House. This is a time when America can do things. And they had, they were still riding high from winning World War II, and had all that kind of the treasure that we had taken through the 50s and so on. We had all of that. And we were really the world's Russia, whatever, the Soviet Empire, like that, they were there too, but one of the world's serious superpowers. And so, like, it was a time to project American influence and power and ideals and idealism into the world at large. And that is what the Republic is during this time. It is a time of optimism and hope and, like, wow, look what we're doing. Like, let's non-ironically, non-cynically share this with other people and help let's just make things better. So which is a really refreshing way to look at Star Wars. And we haven't really seen it before.
No, as we just spent like 2 hours talking about tragedy.
Yeah, look, I'm telling you, it feels cool. It feels really cool to have Jedi who Jedi show up, and it's like, this is awesome when the Jedi show up. It's really, and the things the Jedi choose to do and the things the Republic chooses to do, it's not compromise. It's just like, we're gonna have to work together to pull this, to make this happen. I mean, I don't know. It's very it feels inspiring to talk about it. It's inspiring to write about it. And I kind of feel like it's maybe what we sort of need right now as a society, as I, talk to you from my bunker here in upstate New York. So that's theme one. That's
theme one, optimism.
Yes. I would say trope one, or whatever you want to say, is there is a very cool romance in it that is complex. Yeah, I know. That is very complex and
Mr. Soule.
Yeah. That is unusual and we have not seen before in Star Wars, and I think will get people interested and excited, and it will go to some very cool places. And it's, the thing that I would say about it is that it's very adult, not in an X-rated way, but it's adult in a way of like the issues that these people are dealing with are like they're serious. These are people thinking about their role in life in the galaxy and how they're gonna cope with their feelings at the same time. So it's very cool. And then the third element that I would say would get you interested is that we're going to see the Jedi doing stuff that like you have never seen before. This is a time when the Jedi are not like, they do a lot of things together. They do a lot of, again, this is one of the things where I don't want to say too much, but they do things that require a lot of coordination and a lot of focus and a lot of the Jedi sort of communing with the Force in a way that's going to be very impressive to do some really things that will kind of, I think, are kind of mind blowing and cool. And that happens on a micro level, like on an individual level, and also on a macro level. So, this is a time when the Jedi are unified and super cool and super like excited about being Jedi. There is no shadow of Palpatine slowly encroaching. There is no there's been a huge purge that killed all of us. Like, these are Jedi who are confident and together and know what they can do. And yes, there are threats they have to deal with, but they're going to get it done. And yes, I realize we've seen stuff that to a degree in the Clone Wars and so on and so forth, but it feels different. It feels awesome. You will really like it. So
I love the Force. So this is like my jam.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we try to explore the Force in new ways. My novel, Light of the Jedi, is really just a tiny part of the overall storytelling. Enormous.
It's the first
plans. Thing. Yeah, enormous plans in place. And I think my book is great. I'm very, very excited for people to read it, but this is a long play, and the story overall is just phenomenal. So I just can't wait for people to start reading it.
All right. So I guess this is a kind of a good way to wrap it up, but like,
sure.
How are the stories that you're going to tell? And you kind of leaned into this, I think, a little bit with the last question, but how are the stories that you're going to tell in the High Republic going to add to the mythology?
Well, the idea is to do things that we have never seen before in Star Wars that also feel extraordinarily Star Wars. They are massive, but also very personal. And it's really using the Jedi as the main actors in the story in a way that we didn't really see in any of the Star Wars storytelling that we've seen before. There are obviously like significant Republic people and so on and so forth, but like even in the prequels, you basically had Anakin and Obi-Wan, and there were others, Mace Windu, whatever. They all sort of showed up. Yoda showed up. They were around, but really that was a story about Obi-Wan and Anakin. In the High Republic, there are a lot of Jedi with very rich lives doing a lot of really cool things, all of which drive the story together. And they come and they mix and they meet, and there are huge opportunities for them to do cool things together and apart. And it's just really like, I don't think we've ever seen a real exploration of the Jedi Order as a thing as we will see in the High Republic. And it's really cool. It's really exciting to be part of it. I'm so honored to be doing this. It's such a big deal.
I'm really looking forward to reading it. It's going to be out.
August is the yeah.
Your edits are due soon. That's what's due.
Yes. My edits are due. Yeah, frighteningly soon, but it'll be okay. I'll get it done.
Soon.
Yeah, I'll get it done.
I think that fans are looking forward to having a new sort of written format to dig into, the chance to explore a very different time period. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the brain trust has come up with, especially since, as you said, it is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. I think everyone will be really excited, and we, the five of us, so that's, obviously me and Justina Ireland and Claudia Gray and Kevin Scott and Daniel Jose Older cannot wait for this material to start dropping. It feels like it's been ages since we started working on it, but that's all of the time we put into it has resulted in a really cool story. So we're just excited for you guys to see it.
The most important thing that I love that you have been able to do is the five of you working together and communicating so closely. So you're actually weaving the tapestry, as you said, and working together to do that.
Yeah, no, we talk constantly. We have, weekly calls, we have a Slack, we have, we talk, we text each other. Like it's very much, I had a question just the other day about, I'm doing this thing. What do you guys think about it? And everybody sort of chipped in and their input was super valuable. So it was, it's, I've done a lot of work in Marvel and DC Comics, as I mentioned earlier, and that Star Wars stuff, but also superhero. And so you end up doing a lot of work with multiple writers and so on, and crossovers, what have you. And this High Republic work has been really just hugely gratifying in terms of the way we all contribute and the way that it's all very giving, and nobody's precious about their ideas. It's just, let's make it as good as we can. Let's make it great.
I love that you get a chance to be a maker of your own in the Star Wars universe, because this is like untouched territory and you get to forge a new path. Yeah,
that's a big part of it. That was a big part of it from the beginning, is trying to do something that didn't have to be interwoven with the existing storytelling to such a degree. Like, you write a Poe comic or Rise of Kylo Ren, and it really has to be aware of all the other stories being told at that time. But this is our little playground. So we're having a blast, and I think it's going to feel, like I said, really fresh and cool and new and exciting when people get to it.
Well, thank you, Charles, for this incredible interview. I hope that you enjoyed it.
No, I did.
Thank you, Charles, for coming on the show and doing this amazing charity auction to help independent booksellers. Thank you. Where can people find you and everything that you're doing?
Well, the best place to keep up with what I'm doing is just charlessoule.com. There is a prompt to sign up for my newsletter there. I sign up one per month where I talk about whatever I'm working on, which often includes Star Wars stuff. So I would say sign up for that. There's a lot of exclusives and things like that I put off of that newsletter. It's I know newsletters are kind of a pain, but this one is, I think it's particularly good. So that, I'm also super active on Twitter. I respond to lots of people when I can. And that is just Charles Soule is my Twitter handle, @CharlesSoule. So those are really the two main ways to do it. I'm not on like Facebook, whatever, but like it's really Twitter and then my website. There's a contact form on the website if you have questions. But again, Twitter, newsletter, you can find me. So.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. This was awesome.
And that was Charles Soule, who is the author of The Light of the Jedi, which is the first book that is being released for the High Republic. All right, Kyle.
Yeah. Wow.
What do you think of the High Republic thus far?
So there's a lot to like. There's a lot, but there are some things to be wary of, I think. Mm-hmm. And we've kind of talked about them offline as well. It's interesting to hear Charles speak about, this is like this great era of the Jedi. It's, and that's nice in a way. Like there is this really like burgeoning optimism, but also like as you pointed out to me, there are some overtones and undertones there, especially like when he's comparing this to the Kennedy administration, which is this magical period in that everybody looks back on in America where, oh, it's great Kennedy.
But it wasn't good for everybody.
It wasn't good for everyone. Exactly. Yeah. Like it was good for certain people, but it wasn't good for a lot of people. And also because there was that really like that blind optimism there, we saw what happened with then Nixon, there were the Nixon years. And then beyond that, we know kind of, that was what George always said too, like compared the downfall of the Republic to was, like if Nixon won in a way. And then we go beyond that, and then we're in the, the First Order territory. So it's, and Camelot as well that you've mentioned. So there are some, some things that, to be wary of that I think maybe he purposely said that, or not, maybe not purposely said that, but subconsciously doesn't know that he's saying that because we are going to go from this, we're entering this era at the peak height of optimism and of the Republic and of the Jedi. We've got this very, very like charismatic Supreme Chancellor, Lina Shu.
Yeah.
She's definitely like kind of carving out this Starlight Beacon in conjunction with working with the Jedi to have this this traveling fortress, or maybe not fortress, but traveling
Starlight
ship of
Beacon.
The Republic that's just going out. The Starlight Beacon, yeah.
Yeah. She is very like strong and determined and like wants to make the Republic something that will last, for a millennia from now. And we know that that's not possible at all, right? So it's like, It's got all this optimism. Generally, like as I'm reading the material, I'm brought back to how I felt when I watched the Clone Wars and like a little bit of Attack of the Clones and also the prequels in general. When the Jedi, you first saw them and they looked so cool. Like there's this moment I honestly forget which one of the books it was, but where one of the Jedi cuts open a door, and it may have been a test of courage. He cuts open a door and like uses the Force to push the door open. It's like a bulkhead or like one of these like very, thick doors. And I was like, that brought me back to sitting in the theater and seeing Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon like break out of their room that they're trapped in, Right. It also felt a lot like the like, oh man, aren't the Jedi cool that we get in the Clone Wars when they're on their rescue missions or they're trying to do good or they're, Anakin is just being awesome or Ahsoka is just being awesome. It makes you feel that way as you're reading the books. You're like, thank goodness the Jedi are actually like so interesting and cool. But in that, there's also like these seeds of like, are the Jedi actually right all the time? And those are like embedded throughout all of the work. And it's really fascinating to be like quite literally, we have a character in Into the Dark who questions the like, is the council right? Like, and specifically says like the darkness is as much a part of the Force as the light. The Order thinks it can bisect the Force so neatly as though the primal living energy of all existence were a thing that can be sliced and served. Like genuinely questioning kind of the fundamental assumptions that the Jedi Order is based on. And that to me is incredibly exciting that in addition to, where are the cracks when some people view society to be so interesting? Or where are the cracks when society, from a certain perspective, looks to be very solid and beautiful and everything, but actually there's a brewing darkness even in that. So cool. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. We're starting out with the blinding light, but where's the darkness behind that? And we're starting to see it. Or we're, by the end of each book, there is a little bit, not to get into spoilers, but there is, the Jedi are even seeing that in themselves, and they're questioning that in themselves too. From especially that quote is very
in Claudia
powerful.
Gray's book is, my goodness, that is, don't want to spoil any of that, but like, that
not saying who says it or anything, but it is like why this book really tugs at you is because these books tug at you is that people are constantly struggling with like what they think they should be doing versus what they are being, what they want to do, right? Or what they feel drawn to do. And there is also in the High Republic period of time, and this is something that like the Republic itself is in this kind of expansionary mindset, and that is driven by the Chancellor herself. But it ends up because the Outer Rim, which is where they're expanding into with the Starlight Beacon and sending Jedi and Republic people out there, it ends up feeling a lot very colonialistic. Like,
yes, absolutely.
The almost like Republic PR says we are all the Republic.
That was another thing that made me raise, because again, that's just this blind optimism, and you're not really like, this is a big galaxy. It's full of all sorts of beings and things and religions and societies. And no, we're not all the Republic, and not all of us want to be the Republic. That doesn't necessarily make them the villains. So there's this clear cut, they're not portraying other societies as the villains at this point, but you can start to see where people would see this fledgling, Starlight Beacon out here, and the hubris of just even calling it like this Starlight Beacon.
Like that's an assumption they are in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So like right there, they're just kind of like, wait, like we didn't, we were doing just fine. And they do establish like there are some serious problems out in the Outer Rim with a group of people. We can't get too deep into spoilers, but the Nile, they're going to disrupt a lot of things. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that like everybody is there. Everybody needs the Republic. Everybody needs the Jedi. It's good that they're there in some regards, especially the opening of the book. But like this we are the Republic, this colonialism aspect is really, really blinding, especially in light of the Jedi, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. It was more heavy in the light of the Jedi because the mission of establishing Starlight Beacon is on everybody's minds, and they feel like it's even more important because of the catastrophe that happens in the hyperspace lanes. And so Light of the Jedi, and this is very light spoilers, but Light of the Jedi starts out with a catastrophe, and almost everybody in the first couple of chapters dies. So like, just be warned. But the assumption is that you cannot safely travel via hyperspace to the Outer Rim past a certain point in the hyperspace lanes. And so you almost have to slow down for a period of time. And this kind of reminds me of, hey, you're traveling to the Old West, you got to go on a wagon train, like you're traveling out west. To get there, you have to kind of go and join a wagon train to get there. You have to go take a coach road. It takes you a bit of time to get there. And so people group together to travel together because it's not safe due to pirates, due to sort of this disaster phenomenon that has happened. They're still not sure exactly what it is or how it's happening, but there's a danger in travel. And whenever you have that sort of precarious nature in travel, only people that are desperate will go out to the Outer Rim or to the west because it's dangerous. You have to have a money reason, I want a new start reason, a personal reason, or you are like the Jedi trying to bring order to an orderless area.
Right.
Order is a very tricky word in Star Wars because order is what the dark side always says that they want, right? It's bringing their ideas of control to a place that is genuinely free.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, again, like, it's kind of like they're showing up in a way like, I feel like when I was reading the first, 100 or so pages of Light of the Jedi, it felt like I was reading an old Superman comic or something like that, because the way they show up to prevent this like massive catastrophe. But I get the sense that like most people in the galaxy, like they've heard of the Jedi. It's almost like kind of like in the sequel trilogy era, like except they for a fact know that the Jedi are out there, but most people have never really seen a Jedi. Mm-hmm. They've never really seen them in action. They've just kind of heard of them, especially when people are trying to work with the Jedi during this catastrophe, which is, it's like a first third of Flight of the Jedi is the Jedi kind of dealing with this. It's almost like you're reading it in real time, because I think each chapter kind of starts with like a countdown.
Yeah, to when the catastrophe happens, and then it's like the aftermath is the next 2/3 of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how they introduce the Jedi as these like, I don't want to say like demigods, but like, like superheroes that just come out and they do these amazing, what they accomplish in the first third of the book is pretty amazing, and they're all working together, which is, again, like we see things in the Force and the way that it's led in the Force, like something that we've never really seen before, I think, in Star Wars. And I won't spoil that at all, but it's pretty cool the way that happens. But it also, like, it's almost like that's like the peak of the book, and then everything after that is dealing with the repercussions of now the Jedi are out here. Now this thing has happened, and now we're seeing how this society in the Outer Rim and around the galaxy is reacting to this, to the fact that the Republic, they've shown up, but they're also the only ones that are able to kind of, try to solve. They're trying to help this other system, like, kind of solve this problem, this issue of the hyperlanes becoming, which were always kind of a mysterious thing. I didn't realize how mysterious like hyperspace and hyperlanes were until I read these books. That's a Star Wars piece of technology I think I took for granted at all times, like the ability to travel between stars.
Yeah, it was always used like at the speed of the plot, or it was, hey, they just go,
right.
It was never something that they explained. And they kind of explain it a little bit in this book, a little bit. And I'm okay.
There's a history of it too. Yeah.
And also, like, it seems to be semi-connected with the Force, which I also kind of love too. Because that like ties to the Purgle from Rebels and some other concepts that, we've gotten to know over the years, and especially like the Chiss navigation that we get in Chiss Ascendancy, that book. I don't know. I like them doubling down on Force navigation. I love it.
Yeah. No, I love, if there's any like Thrawn, Chaos Rising and Skywalking fans out there, you're in for a treat, because there's definitely, we're kind of seeing a mirror of that. It's maybe not called the same thing, but you'll definitely recognize some of that for sure.
Absolutely.
I liked in Test of Courage, I don't think this is a huge spoiler, but the fact that the Jedi, there are, we're learning a lot of different Force abilities as we go through these books. And like a big one is way seeking, which is the Jedi kind of using the ability to seek out life in a planet. If they're stranded in space somewhere, rather than using a navicomputer, they're able to kind of reach out through the Force. It's a really difficult thing. But it's interesting. That was one of the things I thought that there is some sort of implied connection between the Force and the ability to travel through hyperspace. It's
so cool. I just love it.
Yeah. There's some great Force stuff, I think, for sure.
Well, and also like it's like just thematically, the Force is something that is not corrupted. And it feels that way, right? So Palpatine existing in the galaxy is like a black hole in the Force. He corrupts it, and he has, kind of clouded the Force with the dark side, right? We don't get that impression with even how people are so connected. It's like this personal thing for everybody. Avar talks about it in the book, and some of the creators talked about how people view the Force in different ways, and how they tap into it is a very personal way. But Avar actually listens to kind of like the song of the Force, and it was really pleasant to like view the Force in different ways than just it's just an energy field. Well, yeah, it is, but that can mean something different to different people because of their life experiences. And that just makes me very, very happy.
Yeah. And there's that great passage, and I won't read it, but people will know it when they read it. There's a great passage where Avar is reaching out through the Force, and you're also reading what other Jedi are feeling while she's reaching out to them, because one of her strengths is kind of being able to cement Force bonds and strengthen them. And so as she's feeling the Force in her way, which is, she interprets it as a song, you in the same paragraph are reading this breakdown of all these other Jedi and what they're feeling and how they interpret the Force and how it comes to them. And I love that. I thought that was so cool, because it's that's the thing, is they do a great job of you're meeting a lot of characters, but every time you meet them, you learn a lot about like why they're Jedi, what being a Jedi means to them, what the Force means to them. And it's just really, really cool. Like you're just kind of like, oh, here's another person, and they're all really. I don't think I met a character in any of these books that I didn't like. Even the characters that are villains, I thought were still interesting, and they had their reasons as well.
Yeah, I was concerned about Avar, just because of how she's presented in the art and some other things, but. I very much enjoyed her in Light of the Jedi. I really do hope other authors, especially women, get a chance to write her as well. That's just my personal opinion on that.
No, I agree with you for sure. Especially with what might come later for her.
Yeah,
we'll
exactly. Based on, what Charles himself said, there is a romance in the Light of the Jedi that is blooming or starting, and you and I have both speculated that it's Avar and one of her childhood best friends, Elzar. Yeah.
Elzar, yeah.
Yep. So the three kind of this trio of Jedi, Stalin, Avar, and Elzar, their names are very similar, Avar and Elzar.
Yes.
I haven't thought of a good ship name for them, but I will. There's a few moments, we don't really spend enough time with them to really understand how deep that relationship goes, but they are the only two that are on a mission together that way. And they spend time, and there's this one moment where they're literally looking at a picture of Varakino, which, for those of you that are not super attuned to Naboo topography, that is Padme's island that they go to in Attack of the Clones.
Right.
and
that jumps off the page too.
you don't put that in, and you don't have them have a lovely walk in a garden, both wishing that the world could be different, if that's not where you're going. And actually, it all comes down to one of the starting chapters where one of the people that actually dies in the cataclysm actually is a big fan of Jedi romances, which I have to put here and now. I know that myths and fables and dark legends is a thing, and we've had the Legends of Luke Skywalker. Just release the Jedi romances already. They can be in-universe books. And I will eat them up, and so will so many people that I love. And have Zoraida write them, please.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes, please. That was who I was thinking. I'm Zoraida Cordova needs to write some Jedi love stories set in this era.
Jedi romance. It's pulp romances that this woman is consuming. And give it to us. I feel like that. Based on my interview with Charles, that this was a foreshadowing, and because this is what is every scene that they're together is super interesting and wonderful.
Yeah, and it's nice too that they're I'm gonna say 99% sure that that's where this is going, but it's nice that we're seeing them falling in love, and we're seeing them starting to kind of question their roles. Not necessarily like, oh, I want to leave the Jedi Order, but just like, I have these duties, I have these things that I want to do, but like there's this person who's been in my life since I was a child and has grown up with me inside of this order and this thing that I've devoted my life to. And like, how can our bond be incorporated into that?
Yeah.
In a way, how can we take that to the next level? Because they already have a bond in friendship, but they're learning different things. And I think Elzar, it's really interesting, like the contrast with him, with his relationship to the Force, as with hers, where she's, this very steady, grounded Jedi Master. And he's this kind of like edgy guy. He's this guy that like, he's known for pushing the limits. But at the same time as he pushes the limits, he's also, they acknowledge that he's expanded the Jedi's knowledge of the Force in ways that they never thought possible,
Oh, I love him
so it's
much.
Very, very interesting to see where these two are going to go.
It gets kind of gooey inside when she is like connecting with him using her powers, and like there's so much like fan food in their relationship that I just want them to go with it. Yeah.
And there's a moment too, and I won't say because it would be a spoiler, but there's a moment too where they join together and work in the Force to solve this other problem. And the symbolism, I'm sure, like with what they're creating too, is just like it's really, really beautiful. Like what they're creating, and also what they're creating to save something and to help the galaxy overall. So there's just
absolutely,
there's lots of fun stuff. Lots of great stuff to chew on there for that. So
I love them. I wasn't sure I was going to, but I really love that they complement each other too, and I'm excited to see, because there is a third person in that triangled friendship relationship. There is Stalin, and we have not met him yet.
Nope.
So that'll be cool.
Yeah, I'm interested to meet him because we've met his apprentice, but we haven't met him quite yet. Or his former apprentice, I guess.
He's supposed to be like one of the coolest Jedi. Like that's his reputation, basically. And so really, really cool stuff. Yeah.
In that lightsaber book that came out, the lightsaber collection or whatever, he was the only of the High Republic Jedi that was featured in that.
He has like a lightsaber that has a cross guard, but it like pops out. It's kind of cool. Yeah. I do want to say, like, if you're very confused going into this, I did create a character map and relationship map just because I felt like there was so many names to memorize. I'm going to try to do one for the Nile too, just because there's so many people to remember. And I think it's really, really important that people get the relationships and like especially the master apprentice stuff down, and like how people are all characterized and related. I'm going to try to do another version of it before as this episode comes out, and I will of course link to that as well, so that people have a good understanding as they're taking on these books and how people are related to each other. It's not spoilered, so there are things, as I tweeted this out when I had created it once the embargo was done, and Daniel and Cavan actually replied and said they loved it, which made me and corrected me on a few things. So I have an updated version from them. But like, what's really interesting is like they were already like, oh, these things need to change, like in their own minds, and commenting on that. And I said, yes, but I didn't want to spoil anything. There are things that change about even these 3 books that come out that are significant about that character map. And some of them are related to character death already. So, I mean, I think it's just really, really important to kind of put that out there as a warning. This is a very dangerous time. So that sucks a little bit.
Yeah. And one thing I will say about the character map that MC created, she was kind of showing it to me as I was reading these books. And, there was a pretty good like version 1.0, I think you got done relatively early on. And I had that going into the other books. And it's anyone who's listening to this, if you're going to jump into these books, it's really, really great. Like, take a look at it. She did a fantastic job, and it helps me out reading the books and then also going back, preparing for this podcast and preparing to write reviews. So it's a great resource.
Yeah,
I recommend it.
Like, I just want Star Wars to like do more of this sort of thing, because like I'm interested in the relationship maps, and it's quite a common thing in like, say, drama or property from, say, Japan or Korea or China, that relationship maps would be released with a property to say this is what you can expect from the relationships out there. And it's one of the things that I love about watching Asian dramas is like you can go and find the relationship map and be like, this is what we're walking into. So I decided to create this because nothing existed yet. But I do hope that it becomes a bigger thing that Star Wars just voluntarily does for people, because I think that it would help a lot of people, because there's so many names. It's so hard to like that in and of itself will be a barrier for many people, but the map helps people right through the door, no barriers. So
right. And
definitely recommend it.
And it's so nice to use too, because, it's as opposed to like, picking up your phone or your computer, going to Wikipedia, like it's right there. I have it up on a separate screen right now as we're talking. So it's very helpful. Yeah. Great work. You killed it.
Thanks. Do you want to talk briefly about the Nile?
Yes, I do.
Oh gosh, they are complicated. So their name, as Charles pointed out, comes from like nihilism or nihilistic and annihilate. And they're kind of, I think previously Daniel Jose Older in one of the interviews called them space Vikings or like pirates in some ways. And they are kind of like that, but they have a different flavor, which is everything that they're doing is personally bent on revenge against the Jedi. Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. And you kind of don't find that out till like later. And that was one thing I wish with Light of the Jedi is they would have just come right out with that. Cause you get a lot of, when you're introduced to them, they are very like nihilistic. They're these pirates and they're very much like they believe in it. It's kind of the, I don't know if there's like a mantra that pirates have, but it's like they believe in the plunder and the spoils, and that's about it. And if a job doesn't, if a heist or whatever they're trying to do, if whoever's leading that heist doesn't come away with like something to contribute back to the greater organization, then that person's like, they kill them. Yeah. I was trying to think of like, there's not really a nice way to say that, like blow them out the airlock or it's, and they are ruthless. They're extremely ruthless. There's no messing around with them. They have, for as nihilistic as they are, they do have a very rigid system with their command structure. There's one person at the top, and the reason that he's been able to, he's called the Eye, and how do you pronounce his first name? It's like Marcion or Marcion, I think. And he's
Marcion? Marcion
Rowe.
Yeah, Marcion
Rowe. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in this role that's like non-leader. He has power to guide, but he is not the leader, except he's kind of trying to be in his own subtle way.
Exactly. And that's his only power right there, is because he knows how to navigate space like no one else does, and that's kind of his big secret. No one knows how he knows that, but he's able to help them kind of sneak in and do these things and then get away really quick, and no one has any idea how they did it.
And it does feel like pirates, Pirates of the Caribbean. Like it feels like any sort of pirate. Like they have their secrets. They know the ways around the canyon correctly, or the ways around the sea, and they know how to sneak in, take people off guard, planets even, and then sneak out. They know how to do this really well.
Like they know how to and they also, I forgot, they travel in like under, when they're in normal space, not in hyperspace, they surround their ships with these clouds, because their ships are kind of these combinations of different parts. They're just these really crude, rough, tough looking giant ships, and they travel surrounded by these clouds. Sometimes they look like fire, sometimes they look like a storm. And it's just, there's nothing subtle about these villains at all. They're
they're
much
really
like,
cool, actually.
they're bad. Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean and the Black Pearl, and how like the cloud bank came in, and then the Black Pearl came out of nowhere and attacked Tortuga. Like it feels a lot like, oh no, the Nile. Oh.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more going on politically inside of the Nile organization, even though you can't really call it that at the start of Light of the Jedi. There's a lot more going on with them, and including how the Eye knows the paths, which is so cool. It was such a cool reveal, so I won't spoil that, but so cool. Yeah.
It's, and then what you kind of get a sense that they're ultimately trying to do at the end of the book too, then you're just kind of like, you have that aha, and then, we're just going to have to wait for some more for the next round of books. Cause this really is just kind of getting to know them at this point.
I kind of feel like the Nile are kind of right. I hate to say that, right? Like screw the Jedi, screw the Republic. Like, they're not trying to destroy the Republic. They're just trying to keep their way of life. And I know that it's it's a terrible way of life, but like, they don't want what the Republic and the Jedi are feeding them.
Yes, they definitely
very
call out the righteousness.
Are anarchist in a way, like screw the government.
They reminded me too a lot of like the War Boys in like Mad Max Fury Road too.
Oh,
a lot. Like there was a very like the way that set up, and the way that they have this kind of like, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a religion, it's more like that with the War Boys in Mad Max, but they have this really huge belief in the organization.
It's very much like in a way like their own version of nationalism to the way that they do things. Yeah, exactly.
Their culture is very insulated. It's this amalgamation of different people who've joined up, or who, because you learn also, like you meet people at the top in Light of the Jedi, but in the following books you meet people that are a little bit lower down in the chain of this society, this kind of like society of like marauders or pirates, and you also kind of learn like how people strive to get there and strive to kind of impress other people that you may have met in Light of the Jedi that you weren't so impressed with, but they're seen as like, the greatest thing ever. So it's,
and it's like, to me, I've found benefit from reading all of the books. Like,
yes,
like from establishing the world, and in some ways, like, we'll get into the individual books a little bit more in detail because we're kind of talking generalistically, but each book and the lens by which you read them really tells you a little bit more about the world. And like, even though a Test of Courage is middle grade, it's still like completely solid and awesome, and a very easy read. Like, I read it in a couple of hours.
Right.
Into the Dark is a little bit more meaty, which it's not coming out until February, but still, like, Queen Claudia Gray, who understands Star Wars better than anyone else I've ever met, really does understand it in such an interesting way. And then, of course, Light of the Jedi, which we can dig into now. And let's talk about themes at the end, maybe, if that's okay.
Okay.
Into Light of the Jedi. Light of the Jedi is really just trying to kick off this time. It's like we do spend a lot of time with the group that is like, we spend a lot of time with Loden Greatstorm, Indira, Porter, Engel, and Bell, who is Loden's Padawan, and of course, Ember the Charhound.
Ember the Charhound, yeah.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time with that conflict because they're literally fighting off the Nile on a planet. But like the rest of the book is like just trying to lay the groundwork of everything that is being set up, I think. And in that way, like it very much plays like a survey to the world, to the universe, to the galaxy far, far away at this time period.
Yes, I absolutely agree with with it being a survey, because it's, and that's the thing is like Charles Soule had a really difficult job, because it's almost like there's a lot of collaboration where you get to know about what stories they're planning, but it's almost like they're like, okay, like, he's like kicking the ball off or something, or kicking it down the field to the next, but it's not like he's just kicking one ball. It's like he's kicking several different balls to, to pass it to different authors as well. So he's just, a lot of the book, you're really just you're meeting people and you don't get to spend a lot of time with them. So his writing has to be very economical about like how he's introducing these and conveying like, here's this Jedi, this is how they see the Force, this is how they experience things, this is what maybe something that happened to them in the past that's made them this way. And then you might not see them again in the book, or you might just see them really briefly or in passing. So it's,
Yeah. I mean,
very much a survey.
that to me is kind of like the regret of the book for me personally, is like I want to know more about these characters, but I think that that's the point, is like introducing some of the cool characters, and in the end everybody kind of ends up on the Starlight Beacon, right? From these 3 books, they all kind of end up at the Starlight Beacon, right. And then it kind of feels like a weird Jedi version of DS9.
Yeah, right. I know. I was thinking that too. It sounds a lot like DS9, the way they the way they describe it too.
Yeah,
it does feel like that.
And I love DS9, so like, don't get me wrong. I kind of love that idea. Like, this is like the frontier. This is the thing. It's just I'm never gonna be able to like lose that comparison in my brain now, though.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too with that comparison too, because like, DS9 was at the edge of the frontier, and it was at the edge of this like, this planet that's having like a spiritual revival after being occupied for so long. Mm-hmm. But there's also, they didn't just embrace the Federation, similar to like how, and I'm getting into Star Trek world, so I'm gonna have to hit the brakes on myself there, because that's a whole other podcast. But it's interesting that, like how they're setting that up too. Like there's this, this, because there's the Jedi Temple on Starlight mm-hmm. Beacon, which is something that's, they don't ever come out like outright and say that that's a big deal. But as much as people talk about that, because you pretty much hear every character at some point remark about how there's a Jedi Temple on Starlight Beacon, that seems like a big deal, that mm-hmm. they have this like mobile Jedi Temple, like out in the galaxy kind of the far reaches of space, of known space.
And I sort of hope that they explore like what the Force and like the temple does for the average person. Like, do they go to the temple to like, hey, I've got a problem, Jedi, and then like the Jedi are like, I see your problem. And it's like Sherlock Holmes type adventures. Like people go to the Jedi to fix their problems, and that it kicks off adventures, or are they kind of like I'm really interested to see like how this works from a story-driven perspective, because adventure seems to, at least in these 3 books, come to the Jedi. Like they're on their way somewhere, or they're like doing something, and then they're like, thrown into adventure. But like, is this sort of something that's going to change around, because Starlight Beacon is now a central like place where people go to get help? Like Fort Starlight Beacon on the Western frontier. Like that's sort of what
exactly.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to the fort for help.
I wondered too if there'll be like, if there'll be like arbitrators, and, if like people will bring them a problem, like, like, hey, this is my starship. Oh, but this person thinks it's their starship. And then the Jedi like hears both sides of it. And then they're like, okay, well, I'll split the starship down with my lightsaber or whatever, like that kind of thing. No more Solomon's babies
in
exactly. Yeah.
If it's Star
like,
Wars,
if it'll be like that kind of thing. Yeah. So, So
I mean,
wonder
it would be interesting if they were kind of like Judge Dredd's too, right? Like they are judge, jury, and executioner of Star Wars.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, and that could be where we get into some really like some territory where it's becomes colonialism and becomes a big problem because people see that as like, well, who the hell are you to do that? You know, like I don't know, like I've heard of the Jedi, but like I don't believe in this. Like, you know, and we've seen in canon too that like other people have different ideas about the Force and what that is, and they don't always call it the Force. Like Legends of Luke Skywalker, and
they talk about other Force users too in these books even.
Right.
So it's like, what makes the Jedi way of doing Force related things the right way? Ooh,
exactly.
Questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're gonna get there at some point with these stories.
So yeah. Into the Light of the Jedi is very much a survey. I think it's actually a very good introduction. I didn't personally enjoy the first third of the book just because I don't like when things jump around too much. It's hard for my brain to keep track of. Also, it's very depressing to see people. You're like, I just got attached to that person and then they died, you know, but there's a big catastrophe that happens. The last 2/3 of the book, I really, really enjoyed. They were really, really solid. There's lots of really cool things that are started. But again, you got to wrap your head. This is a survey. This is an introduction. Won't it be cool when we have more stories for these people? I love Belle and Ember out of the book. I love Avar and Elzar. Yes.
And that's the thing with this book and with the other two books too, was that I really feel like when we get to the Padawans or to the people who are just kind of new Jedi, that's when it gets really, really interesting to see that like the events through their eyes, especially Belle in this book. I really loved like him and his arc, I guess.
Yeah.
And even though he's not in it, like no one's really ever dominates the book in these, but the things that happened with him definitely were the most memorable for me. Yeah. In a lot of the scenes, at least with, you know, kind of like with the Jedi in action and the Jedi finding their footing in the galaxy while all of this chaos is around them.
Absolutely. And then at the end of the book, it kind of leaves off with them sort of understanding the Nile and the threat, but not really understanding what they're up against. That certainly is where it leaves off. Into the Dark happens sort of just after Light of the Jedi from a timeline perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Into the Dark. A Test of Courage starts just kind of right after the Light of the Jedi, or kind of during, in a way, like during the second half. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Kind of towards the end of Light of the Jedi is when A Test of Courage is, and then they both kind of end at the same spot. Yeah, absolutely. It definitely feels like these three books are all kind of ending at the same spots. That's like because they all end up at the Starlight Beacon at the same time. So that's where they were. That's where they were going. And A Test of Courage introduces us to some really cool characters. We have Vernestra. We have Imri. Yeah. We have Imri, who are both Jedi. Vernestra is a young, newly minted knight. She is only 15 years old. Holy hell, I love her so much. Yes. She's great. She really is great. And she's very self-aware too. I just love that. But she's self-aware, but she doesn't have like a complex about it. She's like, it is kind of strange, you know, she doesn't, or she didn't even say that it's strange, but she does kind of acknowledge in the beginning of the book that she is the youngest person to pass the trials, but she's very, very confident as, you know, kind of becoming the caretaker of these other characters who suffer some pretty devastating loss at the very beginning of this book. Yep. Not just for the Jedi there, but also for Avon and Honesty and J6. And I love those three sort of normal characters that are just on their journey. Avon especially, who is related to, like they've released somebody, I think it was Justina commented on it, that she is the ancestor of Sana Staros.
Sana Staros, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
She is the ancestor of Sana Staros. And so she's kind of an inventor and has her own way of thinking about things. And I just love her. I also love Honesty too, because just like the name, he's really awesome.
Yeah. He is great. And yeah, I loved Avon too. I loved how she has like a really abrupt manner about her in a way with a lot of people, but she's never like, again, kind of like Vernestra, she's never like self-conscious about it. She's very confident in herself. She really believes like, that she's asking valid questions because she's a genius, and she hasn't been out in the world a lot. She's been very sheltered because her mother is like this really high ranking. I can't remember if she's an ambassador or a senator, but this is kind of Avon's first journey out into the galaxy, and she's fascinated just by everything. And so when you get to see her like see a world or see an aspect of the galaxy through her eyes, it's really, really fun because she's skeptical. She's asking questions. She just wants to understand everything. There's a great scene where they're talking about lightsaber.
Pull them apart.
Yeah, the lightsaber. Yeah. It's so great. I loved it. Yeah.
And like J6 is a solid add to the droid world. She was a guard droid that was reprogrammed with a nanny protocol similar to IG-11. So amazing.
And is Avon the one that programmed her? Or did she have some hand in that? I can't.
Oh, she's been reprogramming her since she was given to her, but the nanny programming was her mother. Yeah, which is so cool. And I do have some speculation, if you will allow me, about Avon. I think Avon is going to go and join the bad people, and she's going to create that thing that she teased that says, "I'm going to create a machine that blocks the Force."
Oh, okay. I didn't pick that up at all.
So she's just speculating about the Force, and she's like, I'm going to create a machine that's going to be able to block the Force. And I was like, oh,
interesting.
I feel like this is foreshadowing.
Yeah, like or like if maybe she'll like inadvertently create that, and maybe she won't necessarily join the bad guys, but maybe she'll in a way it'll be kind of like, I created this monster I didn't mean to, just by tinkering or something.
Oh, yeah.
She has to figure out how to undo that.
That would be cool too. Yeah.
Yeah. That would definitely be a curveball for sure.
And it would be something like that the Nile would just like absolutely like eat up and love, and then would cause this very Thrawn-like complication with him not having, like, Thrawn in Legends had a way because of these Force creatures that could block the Force, but that they've never brought them back into canon. But I was like, it would be really cool if there was a machine that was very destroyable that could be used in that way.
Right. Well, and that's funny that you say that, because she kind of reminded me of Entrapta from She-Ra. Like, she kind of had the same.
Yeah, she definitely had Entrapta.
She kind of had that same energy, and we all know kind of like how she went over, and She-Ra had to kind of like on to the. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of to Hordak.
The Horde.
So. Yeah, so that could, cool. That could definitely, I could see that for sure. I hadn't even thought of that. Just kind of clicked when you were saying that.
Well, you definitely get that feeling like she's in it for the knowledge and she's in it for the understanding. And your total like Entrapta parallel, I get that very much too. Yeah, that's awesome. So,
no, she's. I think, I don't know. I mean, can we say, like, talk a little bit about like the fact that they go into this cave and we know, like, with caves in Star Wars, that can be, because I thought I saw some stuff early in the book too. Like, they talk about the metamorphosis trials that Honesty would go through with his from his culture. And then they all kind of go into this cave, and not to give away what happens, but some people emerge from it different in bad ways, and some people emerge from it resolute and determined to kind of know. And by the end of the book, people are in much different places. I think it was really interesting, that aspect of it.
I would say that was entirely like mythically purposeful. Yeah.
Totally.
Yes.
As soon as they went in the cave, I'm like, oh, they're heading into a cave. Something's going to happen.
You've been listening to too much What the Force. That's what's
I think that's
on.
why.
Yeah. No, I agree. I didn't want to go into it too much because I highly recommend Test of Courage by Justina Ireland. It's a very quick read. It's really wonderful. I love everything that they did with the book, and it absolutely makes me want to like read more about these characters in any adventure that they go on, even though it's a middle grade novel. And so like bravo.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I read this right after Light of the Jedi, and I just, like with you, the same with you, I read it in a couple hours, had a cup of coffee on my couch, had a great, just, laughed, had a great time, like hanging out with these people, and felt like by the end of it, I was like, all right, what's next? And I think they pop up at the end of Light of the Jedi. You can kind of, when I went back, that they're kind of showing up there, and, or no, it's actually Into the Dark. And I think Reith is actually, because he's friends with Imri, he's kind of thinking like, oh, I wonder what Imri's up to.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing. So, yeah. So it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Into the Dark, which is sort of starts before the Light of the Jedi, before the catastrophe happens. And then kind of during the catastrophe, and ends where Light of the Jedi ends as well. So it's a little bit more complicated, and it's not coming out until February. So we're going to be a little bit like maybe tighter on spoilers, but we can talk about Reef.
Yeah.
We can talk about kind of some of the thematic things that are happening in the book. But in general, Claudia Gray remains queen of Star Wars, and I love anything she does.
She certainly does. And I would say too, like one of the reasons, aside from embargoes and things like that, like after reading these first two books, going into this, you're going to be well equipped with what this universe is, or like what this point of the era is, where the Jedi are at. And it's such a great story to dive into that. You don't really have to think about like who's doing this, who's doing that. Mm-hmm. We do meet a new kind of newer, a new villain, but it's definitely different from the Nile, even though they are around as well. But yes, Claudia Gray is queen. She really knocks this out of the park. And I hope this isn't her only contribution to the High Republic, because she sets up some pretty amazing things. And yeah, I want more of her writing in this era. Lots of very like meta stuff in this book.
Very
too.
Meta stuff.
Very
Conversations
meta. It's
about the Jedi, about the Force, about morality, about internal psyche. Like I quoted that quote from Into the Dark from at the start of the episode. It is really fascinating that she's exploring these things in the book. And for those that have read Bloodline, and other works of Claudia's, there's tons of stuff that she's pulling in kind of from the Claudia Gray Star Wars book universe that she likes to go back to. And it feels comforting to be like, yes, Claudia, yes.
Yeah, her writing is so distinct too. It's
yes.
Like you pick it up and right away I don't think I've ever met a Star Wars fan that doesn't like a Claudia Gray book, but like, you feel right at home. It's very much like, oh, okay, like I know exactly, or you don't know what you're in for, but you're like, she's taking you by the hand and you're like, okay, I'm here for the ride. Same if like you were to watch a Rian Johnson Star Wars film, you would be like, okay, I know that I can trust this person to lead me down a good story, and I know what I'm going to get, and it's very, very good.
If you could like talk about 3 themes that were like in this book, what would you classify them as?
So we deal with, I'm trying to think. So there's a bit of loss at the, and there's grief that one of the characters is dealing with because of events from the other books. There is, I would say like discovery as well, because they're going into a very unknown. I don't know if we can say. I don't know if saying dark side is too much of a spoiler, but
no, I mean it's into the dark. It's in the title. They encounter. It's fine.
They encounter the dark side here, and
it's very unique.
That's not something that it's very unique. It is very unique, and it's also very jarring too. It's very different. And then also one of the characters is so I'm trying to think of it like a way I would say it, like a theme for this, but there's also like there's a character that is a folklorist, and there's also a character who's very, very into history and history of the Jedi, and seeing those characters come together. I don't know how the theme is for this, but there's, I would say, a reckoning in a way, because these people are also these two characters are also dealing with their own demons. Like one has something that happened to him in the past, along with another Jedi who's present. And you flash back to those throughout the book, and you flash back to how this has stayed with these two people. But then also the other person that is along for the ride has dealt with loss in the beginning of the book as well. So there's kind of a reckoning by the end of this book of how to heal from that in a way.
Yeah. I would say that the theme is like, trauma, but like how to understand that and like move past and like, yeah,
exactly.
How to continue to walk down the road, even though you've experienced those things. And they do it. What's so fascinating is that the people that do it right do it together. They do it like with each other.
Yes.
They find a way, and it's like this ties into the theme that I'm really seeing in these books, is that the attachments that these Jedi have make them stronger.
Right. Like, absolutely.
At one point, and I don't remember which book it is, but one of the Jedi is like, or one of the Jedi's question, it's like, well, isn't that like a father or a mother? Like, isn't that like a parent? And they're like, it is, but it's not. Like, it's hard because in so many ways, like the friendship between Avar and Elzar is a strength. The attachments that these characters that are on these kind of adventures together find is the strength that pulls them through the darkness. What are you saying to us, authors? That's not the Jedi of the Fall.
Right.
It's cool.
Which again, like makes me really, it's so cool to see these bonds and they're finding strength and support in each other. And like you mentioned too, dealing with this trauma of the past and not sugarcoating it, not icing over it or anything like that. They're fully dealing with it. And by the end of this book, they've really found a way to live with that and found a way to help each other heal. Which is really important, I think, because
even in the other books, like to move past certain dark things that have happened or certain traumas or certain experiences, the only way that they're able to do it is with comfort and the community and like other people and like the attachment that to these other people and the relationships that they have. And so like the relationship chart I like started with is like gonna expand because it's like all of these people are like friends or like they have these connections, and it's actually very important to their success against, falling to the darkness, because in the end, the compassion and the love that you have for other people is the light, right? Understanding the darkness and turning towards the light is all in there. And what I want to say is that like all of this feels like the logical conclusion of the High Republic is both Cavan and Claudia's books that they released last year or the year before.
Right.
Like, so Dooku Jedi Lost and Master and Apprentice, which were connected in and of themselves, and they were already working on the High Republic. So it's kind of fascinating to see that they kind of already know, hey, that's the downfall of the Republic. Those two things, you can see the cracks showing,
Right.
But here, it's not there.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully said. That's exactly what it is they are, yeah, they're finding, talking about how Avar's strength, and she's like basically the first Jedi that we meet, is kind of communion and bringing these Jedi together and strengthening their bonds. And so right away it establishes that like there is like a network between these people, and it's not, and that makes it sound really dry and really technical, but when you get up close to them and when you get to see them in action together and just in conversation with each other, you really do get a sense that like, yeah, these are friends, these are people that care about one another. They're not just like, trying to get deeper into the force or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of humanity with these Jedi too. It's not just like, oh, we're afraid you're going to go to the dark side, stay on the light side. It's very much an exploration. And they do have those types of questions too, but there's never a simple path to the answer. It's always winding. Whereas, with previous stories, it seems like it is winding in a way, but it's, the destination is straight ahead in front of them. And, the journey is very quick, is very short to either the light or to the dark. So, and this doesn't feel like it's that simple to them.
No, it's something that like I think one of the characters at one point says being a Jedi is constantly choosing the light. Like it's very like that's the sort of stuff I love to hear, is like that moral and ethical questioning of everything, and like how do you navigate having darkness within you and carrying that. Well, these authors really do explore it, and that's wonderful.
Yeah. It's I have a lot of excitement about this era and like the books that are coming. I'm really excited that Cavan gets to write a novel. That's I can't remember the name of it. It's coming out in a couple months, like in the spring, Google. I think. But
The Rising Storm.
The Rising Storm. Okay. I keep wanting to say like the Shadow or something like that, but The Rising Storm.
It's going to come out June 29th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we still haven't even seen the comics either. I think we've just seen little tastes of those, but I'm also excited for the comics as well, because it seems like those might bridge the gap between these books and that novel.
Yes, exactly. I'm planning on keeping up with it. I might not do, deep dive episodes into the comics, but I will certainly tweet my thoughts when I get them. I'm excited to see how it goes, because it looks like they might be their focus really does feel like it's on the Padawans, at least so far. Just from a lens perspective, there's a lot to do with Padawans, and maybe that's just because the two of the three books were middle grade and young adults, so maybe that just sort of makes sense. But I like that. That's Star Wars for me.
Yeah, I thought it was a great way too to introduce us to it, because we're kind of looking for these Jedi to explain things to us, and and for other people to explain the way that the state of the galaxy and the state of things. And so it's a good way for us to experience that through them, through the Padawans. And I like that, especially with Into the Dark. I felt like that was a huge strength of that book.
Yes, exactly.
And another great character in the book too, and I can't talk too much about her because it would get into spoiler, but Affie Hollow is awesome. I really, really like her, and she's not a Jedi. She's basically a pilot, and there's a really great crew of pilots that the Jedi and the Padawans are traveling with. Yeah. And she's awesome. I loved her story. And by the end of the book too, you're just like, you're totally cheering her on. So I get excited. I think a lot of people are going to talk about Affie Hollow. She's great. And Geode.
Yes. I also loved how like her and the other pilots really gave us some good context to like how they're like helping the Republic with the Outer Rim, but are also like they understand their difference from the Republic. And there's a lot that would have to be overcome if the Republic were to show that they were beneficial to the Outer Rim people.
Yeah. And they're also finding out that's interesting you said that too, because they're also kind of finding out that the organization that they're a part of, that they really, really strongly believe in, that Affy's adoptive mother actually runs, they're starting to see the cracks in that as well. And that's a big part of their journey in that book, is questioning this order, this system that they've been a part of, to kind of in contrast with what the Jedi and the Padawan are experiencing.
Yeah.
So it's again, Queen Claudia. That's what all you got to know.
Yeah,
she's gonna take you on a great journey, and get excited for it. So
and like, oh goodness, and I don't know if I said this at the top of the podcast, but I've been thinking about this whole time. It is an absolute breath of fresh air. And I felt that way about the Chiss Ascendancy Thrawn book, Chaos Rising. Like, I loved that book. It felt like a fresh air to be away from the Skywalkers, even though momentarily we had Anakin in the book. I absolutely love the fact that this feels so different than any time period associated with the Skywalkers.
Absolutely. I was relieved there's not a Skywalker to be found. It's
Skywalker who? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And really, and also too, I mean, initially I was a little nervous about, like, you know, how big of a presence is Yoda going to be? And I don't want to say much about because I think that might be a spoiler, because I think a lot of people will be looking for him. But just, you know, the way that Yoda, his presence is inserted into these books is very subtle. Good. Like, you just, it's very subtle, and it doesn't, you know, there's nothing, you know, it's more or less connective tissue to what comes. And just to know that, like, when you're seeing him in the prequels and you're seeing the Jedi as they are in the prequels, he's been here. He's seen this. He knows what's going on, what you're reading too, so that it does, you know, it will shape events of the future. Yeah. So.
And in so many ways, like, he is part of the downfall of the Jedi, because, like, and he learns from that in Empire Strikes Back. So all of these are lessons that he is learning to become probably over restrictive. So that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, especially that little, like, connection in Dooku and Jedi Lost, where he talks about a character who, and I won't say it, you know, but he talks about a character who's mentioned in these books, who now we know is one of the Lost 20, and all he does is he says that, you know, that was a very sad story. That's a very sad story, what happened to this character.
And the Lost that's 20 all I'll say, but, like, are basically Jedi who have left the Order.
Right. And
Dooku becomes one of them in the book itself. So that's, we know things are going to change. It's going to be in some ways probably a hard period of time, because this idea that the Jedi are just pure light is being challenged even from the first pages. So that's cool.
And like, I don't remember if I said this at the, you know, the top of the show either, but, you know, we're meeting them at the absolute peak right now. And we know that this era is about, you know, we're going to get 150 years of story, because it's Acolyte that starts 50 years before the Phantom Menace. And that's kind of the conclusion.
400 years before the Phantom Menace.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. I thought oh, wow. Okay. I thought for some reason it was 200, but okay. Well, so then it's even, okay. So we're going to get, wow, why did I think 200? But so we're going to,
I'm pretty sure
I can, where,
let me check.
No, I think you're probably right. So I was just looking at my little time period thing.
Yeah. 400 years before the Skywalker era.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me, because I've been saying 200 for forever. So we're going to get about 350 years of this era before we get to, which I'm assuming, I don't know, did Kathleen Kennedy say that Acolyte concludes the High Republic, or it's the conclusion of the High Republic, or it's like the last 50 years? So I'm really confused
I don't really know what has been official or not. I heard that it was 100 years before the Phantom Menace, and then suddenly people are throwing around this 50-year timeline because of the web novel that came out in China, which is set 50 years before the Phantom Menace. So personally, okay, when we talk about ages, the fall of the Roman Empire took 400 years.
Right. Interesting. So, very interesting.
And then the Dark Ages happened after that.
Okay.
So
because
I just want to say like it's not going to be this exact time frame stuff that people are used to with the Skywalker saga, because we're dealing with like long periods of time, and eras are like that. Like it is an era.
Yes. And so that's what I'm thinking, is that we're at the beginning of an era, but the High Republic is going to change dramatically by the time that we're at the end of it.
Like the fall of the Jedi is even over the course of like the Phantom Menace and all the way to the Revenge of the Sith. That's still like, what is it? Like
13,
almost 19 years? 19 years? Yeah. 13 years, somewhere in there. Like it's a long period of time.
Yeah.
Right? And then 20 years after the reign, 20 years for the reign of the Empire, 19 years. And then the Age of Rebellion, which is very short, and then 30 years, and then the First Order is a couple of years. Like that all together is the Skywalker era. So
exactly.
You got to think like that. That's like, we're talking about 70 years ish.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is 400. So
400 years, right?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of time and space, and that's why it feels so fresh. And we might not see the downfall of this era for a really, really long time or anything, but we do start to see some of the struggles, etc., which is cool. I personally don't think that we're going to see the downfall of the Republic really laid the groundwork until Acolyte and kind of closer. Like we start to see those cracks in Dooku Jedi Lost and in Master and Apprentice.
Yeah.
Which are still even farther back. They're like 40 years. Dooku being a young kid is like really far before the Phantom Menace.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see like what, we talked about how the Jedi are so different in this period compared to where we met them in the prequels. It's going to be interesting to see what the catalyst was for Yoda kind of, because Yoda's, he's been around and he's the head of the Jedi essentially in the prequel era, and what happened to have him kind of pass on this really rigid dogma that we meet the Jedi at in the prequels, and this absence and rejection of humanity essentially, in a way, or emotions and things that we really see the Jedi living in balance with in these books. I feel, I feel like it's a really healthy, they really have, healthy emotional relationships. And they're not shy about their emotions. They're not, again, like they're wary of like passion, things like that. How Anakin's always like, you don't want to get passionate because that's Sith territory. But it is a very, they're not, they are walking with those emotions, and they're carrying them, and in a healthy way. Yeah. So,
and Jedi are allowed to have physical relationships.
Yeah.
It's called out in Claudia's book. So again, she gets to wear the crown.
Totally. Yeah. So this is, I feel really good about this era too. Just like what you were saying, I feel like we're going to get a lot of nuance, and like, I can understand maybe people might pick some of these books up and read them, and some of it might seem kind of dry, or some of it might seem very similar in tone, in terms of like, oh, everything's great, but there are these troublemakers out there. But, if you think about the long game of the story that they want to tell, this is a great way to introduce it, because we're going to, see a really, I think there will be huge contrast by the time we get to where Acolyte is, or the stories that, are in between there.
Yeah. Yeah. It still makes me pine for really, really, really old Republic stuff where things are like not as easy, and they're trying to make, like, the Jedi are like trying to help, like, but I'm happy with this period of time. It's really interesting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They mention the Sith Wars a lot.
Yeah, they do.
Too.
They do.
And they don't go into detail, but they do mention these things called the Sith Wars. So it's almost like, we're seeing the seeds planted for some things that could come later.
Yeah.
Even further back. So, but who knows?
That's like where I want to go, right? I'm like, I want Jedi Knights in armor versus, Sith people in armor versus Mandalorians in armor, and just like have everybody have like weird honor and duty and no attachment rules, and like everything is chaotic and awesome. Give me it all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Give us like, I never played KOTOR, but I read like the Revan book. And give us something like that. Like that would, because that, it doesn't feel as like otherworldly as these books do, but it is, it feels ancient in a way, and like give us something that's like truly like ancient. And
I want like the Middle Ages of Star Wars. And although these feel kind of like, this feels like the Wild West of Star Wars, like even more so than the original trilogy or the Skywalker, timeline. This feels very much like that, and that's cool. I like it. It's just I want more like art or more drama and like courtly love, and like I'm a sworn knight, I can't possibly love you, but I do, like that sort of stuff. I eat that up like pudding.
Yeah, let's get Shakespearean with it for sure. Yeah. I mean, like I would love some sort of like Romeo and Juliet, but with two Jedi, or with like a Jedi and a Sith or something. Yeah. Yeah, Jedi and a Sith, Romeo and Juliet. I mean, yeah, that would be pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any further thoughts that you want to say?
No, we'll also read your comic books, because you can find some seeds of these in like The Rise of Kylo Ren, Dr. Aphra. One of my tinfoil hat things is that one of the reasons I think Aphra has been they've not officially said it's delayed, but she's getting into an arc right now that has to deal with the Nile and Nile technology of hyperspace travel and stuff like that. So, but they haven't announced any issues past the one that comes out either this month or next month. And I almost think just because this got delayed and they figured they'd be further along in the storytelling as well, that they're probably kind of holding off where she's going to go until this is passed a little bit. So
that's kind of interesting.
So you can find a little bit of breadcrumbs. Yeah.
We get the archaeologist actually digging up all of these things. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah. She's been talking about the High Republic now for a little bit in these Alyssa Wong books. So it's definitely worth a visit. I mean, you should be reading Dr. Aphra anyway, but this, if you want to get a little bit more, then this is definitely great to pick up. So. Yeah,
and to the Rise of Kylo Ren, there is a massive connection to Into the Dark. So
yes,
massive,
big time.
It's
big
huge.
Time.
So everyone that like has read that comic will instantly recognize it. So
yes, yeah.
Yep.
And there's another connection to Light of the Jedi as well, with a certain Jedi temple. So that's all I'll say.
Sorry. Also that, yes. So Charles was definitely...
I just thought of that too.
Thinking of those things as he was exploring that. So this is awesome. I'm excited for the new era. I'm excited that they like, one thing about books and comics and novels, like especially, is that you get the internal conflict. It's a lot easier to show the like struggle with the dark side, or these conversations between characters where they're actually dealing with very complex, nuanced issues that can easily be lost in a visual format. And so it's awesome.
Yes, the writing is some of the best, really. It is like they did a great job, especially especially Into the Dark, but Light of the Jedi and A Test of Courage are great too. They definitely, you can tell they put a lot of work into these, and I'm excited to see what stories they are planning ahead and what these books set up, because they've already done a great job with Light of the Jedi setting up the two that follow it as well. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah. And Seeing what Cavan does, seeing what Daniel Jose Older does with the comics, like I'm just excited to see this new thing. And it's really interesting to see kind of these authors trying different formats than they would normally do. Like Cavan is very much a comic slash audio drama guy, a little bit of books, but now he's doing a full novel in the Star Wars universe. Daniel Jose Older has only written novels previously for this, but now he's entering into the comics. Like, it'll be interesting to see how they all like play together in the sandbox, and when eventually they start to pull in new or different authors into this time period, now that the architecture, the big columns, the planning is underway and started.
And that's the other thing. I cannot wait to see what other authors they pull into this sandbox, or other, like you mentioned, Zoraida Cordova, other authors. I was thinking about reading these too, where I'm like, oh yeah, if she wrote one, that would be great too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I think it's going to be exciting to see that. Sarah Kuhn too, pull her in as well. I would love some. Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. So
absolutely.
It's going to be cool.
All right, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me in kicking off the High Republic and starting our deep dive / general conversation into what people can expect and what we're certainly excited for. Where can people find you if they are looking for you online, and what you do?
Well, I am on Twitter, and also thank you for having me. It is, again, long-time listener, first-time caller, so I'm really stoked to be here. I was super excited all day long for it. You can find me on Twitter. I think my handle is Kyle D. Larson, D as in dog. I contribute to What the Force occasionally, and then I also contribute to Star Wars Newsnet, and I'll be probably writing some reviews fairly soon of these books for that. And then I write books too. So you can find out more of that and I'm working on a couple right now, but you can find out more of that on Twitter. Occasionally I'll send out links and stuff like that, and excited to share books that I write too. So yeah, that's it. That's where I am.
Well, thank you for checking out this episode, and make sure that you check out the High Republic, because I have to say we have some adventures ahead of us. Cheers.
We do indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Brad, Cheryl Bell, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, James, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Marvin. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or any podcast app. It helps other people find the show. Check out our other channel, What the Fiction, for non-Star Wars content. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, where we have expanded our content to include reviews, metas, and articles, whattheforce.ca. Or on our Discord, links are all in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.